Hi everybody. My name is Aya. I'm just going to first of all acknowledge that we are on the land, the country of the Yalta planet, the Boran people. We pay our respects to the elders both past and present, and we acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship with this land. This is Ittay. Ittay is going to introduce himself a bit more, but I just want to, on behalf of parents and friends, thank you so much for coming to speak to us. We're really excited to hear what you have to say and hear about the comedy that is Israeli politics right now. I'm imagining there's like drama, like masks with the happy and the sad. That's the vibe today. So take it away.
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here at Hashomel Hasair. I love that it looks exactly the same as it did 50 years ago. I checked your couches. You have vacuumed them, that's the smell. So yeah, it's really wonderful to be here in Melbourne. For those who don't know me, but I assume everyone does, but just in case you don't know me, I was born in Israel. I grew up in Melbourne. And then 5 years ago, I made Aliyah, and I now live in Jerusalem, where I have 3 jobs. One is that I teach on gap year programs for various youth movements. My second job is that I'm a journalist with +61J Media, which you should all read because it's the finest Australian Jewish news site out there. And I also am the education director of Kids for Peace, which is a joint Israeli-Palestinian youth movement for kids from East and West Jerusalem. So today I'm going to be talking about politics, and I'm going to do like some little basic information just in case some people here aren't familiar with it, and then I'm going to show you a lot of election ads. And what we're going to do is for each election ad, if you like the ad, you need to put thumbs up and say yay. Okay, if you don't like the ad, you need to put thumbs down and say boo. And if you're not sure, you're a bit hineni, then like sit on the ground. Okay, so we say that we like, what do? Yeah. We say that we don't like, on the fence. Excellent. Okay, I just want to also clarify, despite this number, I'm not a staff member of the Secondary College. I know some people think I am, I have no obligation. Okay, so the Knesset has 120 seats, but no lower house. So it's like range terms, just an upper house. And in order to be the Prime Minister, you need 61 of those 120 seats. The next Prime Minister is going to be one of these 3 gentlemen, either Bibi, Gantz, or Lapid. Okay. And they will be Prime Minister based on whether they can get to 61. So 61 is the magic number. I'm going to use a lot of numbers, but just remember 61 because we're going to come back to that often. So we like having elections in Israel, as you've noticed. I just want to explain how we got here to this bizarre circumstance that when I get back to Israel in November, I'll be voting in my 5th election in 4 years. The reason is because on the 9th of April 2009, we had our first of our 5th elections, which was triggered by Netanyahu facing some criminal charges and a bill that was meant to draft the Haredi not getting through. That triggered an election because the 61 became 57, there was no coalition, so we voted. Then we had a result and they talked about it and then they couldn't get to 61. So on the 17th of September, we had another election, exactly the same issue, nothing changed between the 2 elections. Surprise, surprise, we also had the same result as well. Then on the 2nd of March, 2020, we had another election. Sophie, guys, give Sophie a round of applause. Sophie's arguably one of the best teachers at Scopus. Just want to put that out there. And so on the 2nd of March, we had another election, which also had the same result as the first 2 elections, but we had this pandemic thing. Do you know what I'm talking about? No. So we had the same pandemic as you, except we didn't do the lockdown. We just did the vaccination. Because we took call for locking down. We don't have Dan, after us. So we had optional lockdowns. In fact, during our lockdown, I'll say inverted commas, we had 17 reasons to leave the house. That is true, that's not a joke. two of my favorite reasons to leave the house was to hear the sound of the shofar and to go to a mikvah, and the other one was to go to a demonstration. So you weren't allowed to leave more than 100 meters from your house, but if there was a demonstration on the other side of the country with 50,000 people who didn't wear masks, that was fine because you had a right to political protest. So it was a lockdown, whatever. But on the 2nd of March, which was like a month into the pandemic, people thought that everyone was going to die from corona. Everyone was really afraid of it, like Victoria still is, basically. And so Benny Gantz said, I'm going to break my election promise to not sit with Netanyahu. I will sit with Netanyahu because this pandemic might kill us all and we should probably have a government when that happens. So we did have quite a long gap between election 3 and election 4, but eventually it fell apart. And then on the 23rd of March, we voted again because there wasn't a budget. And that time, Bennett and Lapid formed a coalition without Netanyahu, and that lasted for just over a year. And then on the 1st of November, we're going to go vote again. This time the election fell because someone wanted to eat pita. I'm not joking. There's a law in Israel, for real, that during Pesach, you're not allowed to sell eat biofuels, which was like heroin. You just can't get it anywhere unless you go to East Jerusalem. So I do sometimes, don't tell my mother. And so what happened was the court said to people in hospitals, if you are in a hospital, because you're generally quite sick in a hospital, you can eat chametz in the hospital. This was like a court case, and the health minister, which was from Meretz, he tweeted out and he said to all the hospitals, I'm just reminding all the hospitals that if any patient comes in, they want to eat chametz in the hospital, they're allowed to eat chametz. It's not something illegal. We've talked about this, there was a court case, etc. Then Edith Silverman said, how dare the health minister say to people, you can eat chametz in hospitals? She left the coalition. So the 60 became 59. And then after that, there was another law, which was the West Bank regulation law, and Nir Orach, David Zuabi, and Mazen Ghanem also voted against that. And then we went down to 57, and so we have new elections. Everyone following so far? Beautiful. Okay, so these were the results on the 4th election, the last one we had. And it turned out that 57 seats went to the anti-Netanyahu bloc, 52 went to the pro-Netanyahu bloc, and then through various negotiations, some of the unaffiliated went to the anti-Netanyahu bloc, so that's how they got to 61. And then this miraculous coalition happened with the head of the Yesha Council, that's the council that represents the settlers, the head of the Islamist movement, and a funny comedian journalist guy. And they, for some bizarre reason, managed to form a coalition and stay in power for a year. Amit Segal famously commented on the fact that Naftali Bennett used to be the head of the Settler Council, and as this coalition was announced, thousands of people came to Rabin Square to celebrate the fall of Netanyahu. And he said, who would have thought that the election of a former Yesha Council CEO would lead to tears in the settlement of Ofra and dancing in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square? Because you would think that Ofra would be happy that, a settler like Yamina chair Naftali Bennett is prime minister, but in fact they were crying because they wanted Netanyahu, but then secular Tel Aviv was happy about Bennett. So this is why people always ask me about the future. I never predict anything because this sort of stuff happens, and then I was like, why would I try and speak about the future? So I'm a history teacher, I just speak about the past, and then I don't get anything wrong. Okay, so speaking about the past, so we had this 8-party coalition, all these people were friends. Mansour Abbas didn't get a plate of fruit in front of him like everyone else. I don't know why that was. I'm not saying discrimination, just like everyone else is really close to the fruit, he's far away from it. This is how they had their meetings. Bennett had all of his flags, 4 of them, and they ran a country for a year. Give them a round of applause for running the country for a year. It's not a lot of Jews in that country. So, but they did it, and you shout off to them. Okay, the draft law got passed. It's a weird draft law because it kind of says you don't have to go to the army, so I shouldn't really call it a draft law. It's like you can go to work now instead of going to the army law, because they call it a draft law. They had all of these achievements, I won't go through them now, but They banned conversion therapy against the LGBT community. They allowed gay men to donate blood. They managed the Omicron outbreak without any lockdowns, and they did go to war with Iran. So that was my list of achievements. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through each party, and I'm going to say like why people like them, why people don't like them, and you can yay or boo. Okay, first party is Likud. I haven't said anything about them yet. I'll tell you the information, and then you can express your opinion. Okay, so why do people like Likud? So a lot of people like Bibi Netanyahu. They view him as being very charismatic. He's an excellent communicator. He gives very good interviews in the sense that he doesn't get questions wrong. He's very sharp on his feet. He speaks English very well. He's nationalist. He's right wing. He champions security policies that basically 60% of Israelis are right wing. So he sort of reflects that. He's very popular with Mizrahim, so Jews who came from Arab countries. If you look here, these are the seats, these are the cities that most voted for Likud. Okay, all of those cities, if you know those cities, are cities in the periphery where mainly Mizrahim live. So you can see that unlike really any other party, he's able to speak to the periphery of Israel in a very compelling way. And his main promises this election are to restore stability, to restore Israeli pride, and to reduce the cost of living. That's his campaign issues. The downside of Netanyahu is he's facing 3 criminal charges. These are what they are. All of them involve sort of various allegations of bribery, but not like financial bribery, more if you do this for me, like as in pass this regulation, I'll give you favorable media coverage. So they're all in some way related to media coverage. So the first one is gifts from James Packer. I read through all the gifts. This was hilarious. So the gifts are mostly champagne and cigars, but one of the gifts that he and Sarah Netanyahu got were tickets to a Mariah Carey concert. So if we go down to going to a Mariah Carey concert, I'm just waiting for that headline. If he's found guilty to play Mariah Carey, it'll be funny. Okay, Netanyahu literally posts that every single media channel in Israel is fake news. Whenever there's reports on this, like that's not a, I didn't like Photoshop, that's a real post. Like he picks different journalists, it's like fake news in front of their face. They report on any sort of details of investigation, and then he admits that Channel 10 Haaretz, the marker was. A lot of people believe that, by the way. Don't mind. A lot of Israelis do think that's fake news, and they just watch Channel 14 now, which is like Netanyahu also believes that immunity from prosecution is a cornerstone of democracy. People charged with corruption have to resign are undemocratic, but in order to represent the will of the people, which is to have Bibi, you should have laws that give people facing prosecution immunity. Understand what democracy is now? Previous Likud election have had giant photos of him with Putin and Trump, saying Netanyahu is in a different league. Netanyahu is the only world leader to not have said one critical of Putin when he invaded Ukraine. Like literally nothing.
אם לא נקבל את המנדט להקים ממשלה. עלה בידי להקים ממשלה, קיבלנו. אמרו שלא נצליח להרכיב ממשלה.
60 בעד, 59 נגד.
הרכבנו. אמרו שלא נעביר תקציב ועשינו משהו שלא עשו פה 3 שנים.
יש תקציב למדינת ישראל.
העברנו. אמרו שלא נדע לדאוג לאינטרסים של ישראל מול מנהיגי העולם, ואז שיפרנו באופן דרמטי את היחסים עם ארצות הברית, עם אירופה, עם מצרים וירדן, טורקיה, מרוקו והאמירויות. אמרו שלא נדע לשמור על ביטחון ישראל ולשמר את כוח ההרתעה מול עזה. חיזקנו את כוח ההרתעה, הוכחנו שצה"ל חזק מאי פעם. כל המטרות הושגו. אמרו, ועוד יגידו הרבה דברים, אנחנו לא מדברים, אנחנו עובדים. קמים בבוקר ועובדים. מתוך הבנה שמדינת ישראל לא נוסדה בידי אנשים שקיבלו את המציאות כפי שהיא, אלא בידי אנשים שהסתכלו על המציאות ואמרו לעצמם, אני הולך לשנות אותה. זה מה שעשינו בשנה האחרונה, זה מה שנמשיך לעשות. לעבוד לטובת אזרחי ישראל.
What do we think? All right, tell me why we like COVID. Like, they do things, yeah.
Like it because it's not Netanyahu or something.
Right, it's a bit more positive, yeah. He does like George Clooney. We just call him the George Clooney party.
I don't like it because it doesn't talk about peace, it talks about war.
Yeah, it did have some pictures of blowing up Arab, but they were bad Arabs. So it's like, this is not recorded, is it? Don't tell him I said that. So what's the main weakness of your, like you read like talkbacks about like me, like right wings criticize him, you're not going to guess this, but like think of something like really weird to pick on something for, and this is what people pick on Yair Lapid for. Yes.
Big thumbs.
Not big thumbs.
He hasn't got any indictments in court.
No, there's something he doesn't have that almost every other person.
He didn't finish high school.
He didn't finish high school. Yair Lapid does not have a bagrut certificate, and so a lot of people criticize him for that. I don't know if that matters, but you know, this is important, I know. But he never finished. He had learning difficulties, so he didn't finish his BCS. He did later on go on to study at a university though, and was a very successful journalist and writer and that sort of thing, but he doesn't have a school certificate yet.
Has he been hired in the army?
No, so that's the other thing people criticize him for. In the army, he was a journalist, which is like the crappiest job in the army. Like it's like you can't even hold a gun, you know, like you type, you know, you've got a paper cut, you know. So I'm fine with the paper cuts. They could hurt. I've had one before, but that's one thing the right wing stick for. Yeah, the bagrut and the not doing serious. Because like Bibi Netanyahu was in Sarah like Carl, where like probably sprained an ankle and everything. Yeah. Okay. So the next party is called Machaneh Mamlachti. They translate it to the National Unity Cab. That's not a correct translation, but that's the official English name of the party. It's made up of Benny Gantz, Gideon Sa'ar, and Gadi Eisenkot. Benny Gantz was a very popular former IDF chief of staff. Gideon Sa'ar was a very unpopular justice minister who wasn't passing the threshold, and so they decided to join together and combine their popularity and unpopularity to create more popularity. And then they added Gadi Eisenkot, who was also a former IDF chief of staff. So you've got two generals for the price of one. That's a big plus in Israeli politics. They are centre-right, but they don't like Netanyahu. They support annexation of the Jordan Valley and some reforms to Israel's justice system. This is their main sort of election ad. Only Gantz can form a stable government. The reason Gantz is sort of touting himself as prime minister, he said that the Haredim are very stuck to Netanyahu because, you know, they're in the Bibi bloc. But I, as a religious Jew, like Haredim. And so all of his ads literally have pictures of him talking to Haredim. And then he's basically like, I can get the Haredim to leave the Bibi bloc and make a centrist coalition without Netanyahu because they like me more than they like Lapid. That's his main selling point. I think it's bullshit because the Haredim don't like him. But he thinks they like him because, look, he's got a photo of, I'm guessing they're eating chulent or something. And he's like, look, I'm friends with Haredim. Like, I can do this. Anyway, he's going to get 12 seats, not bad, out of 120, and that's his big selling point. Yes.
To clarify, Gideon Sa'ar,
yes.
he used to be the Likud.
Yes, he used to be the Likud.
And he's left because he doesn't like Bibi.
Exactly.
But what about Netanyahu were they anti?
So many things. Okay, firstly, the corruption charges. Secondly, putting the corruption charges aside, he's lost 4 elections. So they're like, the Likud could now be in a coalition with like 70 seats if they had someone. Gideon Sa'ar was head of Likud now, could have a comfortable coalition with most of the Knesset right wing. So they're saying, like, we keep losing elections because of you. We could win elections without you and stay right wing. Why do you stay right? You're 70, you've got lots of money, but take off their salary. Like, really, like, what's the deal? So that's the issue.
Can't they vote? Sorry, silly question, but can't Likud vote Bibi yet?
So Likud had a leadership race, but there was one candidate. So no. The previous race had two candidates, Gideon Sa'ar and Biman Etel, and Gideon Sa'ar actually left the party. But yes, theoretically someone could run it, but Likud is Bibi now. Like literally there used to be like anti-Bibi people in Likud, but there's none anymore. So the party is essentially his personality cult. Like no one's there anymore that disagrees with him.
How many seats are they going to win?
They'll win 32 to 33, something like that. Yes, Likud will win 32. They'll be the largest party. Yeah.
That's like, how does he confidently say he's anti-Net? Is there criticism of him because he like joined Netanyahu and now he's like, no, I'm anti-him again?
He joined with Netanyahu because of COVID.
Yeah.
Like he didn't want to. He was like,
A handful of times.
yeah, it was like there's an emergency and I'm doing the right thing for the country because we need a government during this pandemic. I can see that argument. There's a logic to it. Now that there's no COVID, he's like, I won't join Netanyahu again because he's corrupt and he wants to do a coalition with all these far right people. Okay. Next party is United Torah Judaism. United Torah Judaism led by Moshe Gafni, who represents Ashkenazi Haredim, both Hasidic and Lithuanian Haredim. Their key concerns are preserving funding for yeshivot, the status of Shabbat, kashrut, conversion, and holy sites at the Kotel. They very much want to prevent the core curriculum of maths, English, and science being taught in Haredi schools. Why is it terrible to learn English? Sophie, please go ahead. Yeah. Okay, and on the other side, why should you not learn English?
Less time to learn Torah.
And also the Goyim speak English. Okay, so
I guess Arabic is often.
Arabic is not no Haredi schools teach Arabic. Although Rambam wrote the guide to complexity Arabic. It's a rational text, so Hasidim wouldn't study it. Anyway, it's a long story, but there are classical Jewish texts in Arabic. But anyway, that's my other lecture. So yeah, that's like because the last government I think was very clever because they've always used sticks against the Haredim and they decided to use a carrot. So they said instead of like punishing you for not learning English, they said any Haredi school that learns English, maths, and science gets an extra 1,000 shekels per student. Like you get a bonus to your funding. So one of the Hasidic schools called the Bells Network, they said, we'll do it. We want the extra funding, we want more teachers, we want, we'll do it. And then the rest of the Haredi parties went nuts at them saying, if you take this, then your schools will have like better teachers, better facilities, and everyone will go to your schools. We have to be united on this. And so then Netanyahu said to the Bells guys, look, stop doing the core curriculum. I'll make sure that if I'm Prime Minister, I'll give everyone bonus funding whether you do the core curriculum or not, and then they drop them. Okay, the downside is that the former leader liked to protect pedophiles from Australia. This was their former leader, Yaakov Litzman. I don't have to say allegedly because he now actually pleaded guilty to it. He pressured a psychiatrist in Israel to write a fake medical report for Malka Leifer so that she wouldn't be extradited to Australia. And in exchange for this, he gave this psychiatrist either a promotion or a pay raise in his capacity as health minister. He also did this for several other people that he shouldn't have done it for. And the police gathered all of this evidence on him and they said, look, we know you did this. And then he agreed to resign from the Knesset and pay a huge fine of 3,000 shekels, about a day of his salary, and get off scot-free. So he's left the Knesset because of this. One of the small downsides of this party. He's left the Knesset. He's retired from politics now. Although, funnily enough, during COVID, he was the health minister, and in the first week of COVID, he told everyone to go home and not even to be out until 5. And then he went to a minyan to pray, and then he got COVID, but in the first week of COVID, and then that was also really bad because the health minister, at least follow your own rules.
How can they have such a religious health minister and be in charge?
Because the last government was dependent on the Haredi, and so he took the health ministry.
Why did you want the health ministry?
because the health ministry is a really powerful ministry, and a lot of people need access to healthcare like Haredi, and then they can help people in their community get all sorts of things they might not get. So it's a way to look after their community.
Do they try and change things? They don't just ask like overturn abortion rights or any of that?
No, abortion is not a political issue in Israel so much, so it's not. Also, Haredi get abortion as well, because in Judaism abortion is allowed, so it's not it's not the same as America. Yeah. Okay. Next party is Shas, led by Aryeh Deri. Shas represents Mizrahi Haredim and also Masorti Israelis. They've been in government, for a very long time, and their main thing is we fight for the poor, because many Mizrahim live in poorer or working class communities. I'm going to show you their ad firstly, only in Hebrew, and then I'm going to translate it. So you might not get it in Hebrew, but just pay attention to the images, and then I'll translate it. Okay? So the ad is this.
אם באמריקה מחלקים כרטיסי מזון ל-41 מיליון אזרחים מעוטי יכולת, אז למה לא בישראל? רק ש"ס תדאג לביטחון התזונתי של 350,000 משפחות מוחלשות מכל המגזרים, באמצעות כרטיסי מזון נטענים. מיליארד שקל קבועים בכל שנה, מעוגן בבסיס תקציב המדינה. בלי זה אין תקציב מדינה, כמו באמריקה.
So I'm going to translate the ad, and then you tell me if you liked it. So the ad says, if America can hand out 41 million food stamp cards to people in need, why not in Israel? Only Shas will worry about the food security of 350,000 families in need for all sectors of Israel, 1 billion shekels, or there will be no budget. Yes, we give, just like in America. Do we like the ad? It's very socialist. Yeah? Okay. Now, of all the countries in the world to choose as an example of socialism, why did you choose America?
Big, strong,
And not maybe Venezuela or, I don't know, Cuba. Why do you think you chose America as the paragon of, like, literally saying, yes, we give, with an image of Obama as, this is what I want Israel to be like? Think of his voters. Sorry?
The difference between the rich and the poor in Israel.
Yeah. But if he said, we want to be like Venezuela or Cuba, what would his voters have said? Socialism, yeah. His voters love America. America's like cool and Nike and Michael Jordan and whatever. And so he wanted to be like America and then used America as an example of socialism. You're going to have to unpack this in your code. But that was a real ad. None of this is made up. These are real ads. Okay. So we like Shas? Yeah. Okay. Shas did very well in Jerusalem.
Did any traction in the ad?
Look, a lot of people who are not religious do vote for Shas for economic reasons. In fact, I know a lot of Arabs that vote for Shas as well because they feel like it's a party that cares for the poor. When they're in town, they don't do that, but their ads always say they will do that. It's like how their ad says they were going to build a train to the airport. Been waiting for that train for like 30 years. We'll get to Labour in a second. Yeah, Beseda. Okay, so the ultra-Orthodox party's got 37% of the vote in Jerusalem, so they do very well in Jerusalem. Tel Aviv, not so much. Okay, the next party is Dash. They're running together with Ta'al, so they're led by Ayman Buddha and Ahmad Tibi. They mainly draw most of their voters from the 23% of Israelis who are Arab or Palestinian citizens of Israel. Hadash specifically always has at least one Jewish member of its party, so it's not correct to call it an Arab party, because it's actually an Arab Jewish party. The Jewish member of Hadash is Ofer Kasif at the moment, who's an Israeli academic that wrote his PhD on fascism, calls everyone a fascist, like every sentence someone's a fascist, like that's his favorite word. Sometimes accurately used as well. And they won't sit in any coalition that supports the occupation, meaning that they won't sit in a coalition with Lapid, Gantz, or Netanyahu. So they're sort of telling their voters beforehand, we're going to be in the opposition. So you kind of know that when you're voting for them, you're voting for an opposition party. It's like voting for a tier, you know, sort of. Yeah. And this was their ad during the last Gaza war. It's a list of the name of every war that Israel's had in Gaza from 2004 all the way to Alot HaShachar in 2022. And at the bottom, there's a quote from Albert Einstein saying, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them." You like the ad?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So a lot of Jews don't like this party. They really don't like this party. Why don't they like this party?
Racist.
Okay.
Because they're like,
Yeah. Because they're overtly saying don't go to war with Gaza, which has very widespread support. Because a lot of Israelis feel like that's how you stop rockets. You have to hit Hamas hard or Islamic Jihad hard. And this is a party saying not to do that. How else are we going to defend ourselves? So people feel like this party will harm Israelis. That's the sort of main criticism of this party. It's also not a Zionist party as well, which means they can't go to the WZO and the Miss Admiral Rundle conferences. The next party is Ra'am, led by Mansour Abbas. This party, also an Arab party. Everyone on the party is Muslim, represents the Islamic movement in Israel, not the Muslim Brotherhood that doesn't exist in Israel, despite what Netanyahu says. And it does have a woman in the list, number 4, which means that she will get in. And they have Arab representatives from the Negev or Nakab, from the Triangle, from the Galil. They try and speak to Arabs who want to be part of a coalition. They will sit with Netanyahu, they will sit with Lapid, and they will sit with Gantz. Their whole argument is, if you vote for Hadash, you might feel okay because you voted for all of your values, but it's a party to go sit in opposition. If you vote for us, we're going to take ministries, we're going to control budgets, we're going to build hospitals, we're going to do this. With the Arab party, you can do something. We're going to use your vote to affect change from the inside, not from the outside. There's obviously a debate between Arabs whether they want the Ram approach or the Hadash approach, but this is kind of the other approach they were in the last coalition. Recently, Mansour Abbas famously, sort of, or controversially, recognized Israel as a Jewish state. This has never been done before by an Arab party, where he said the state of Israel was born a Jewish state, is a decision of the people and a question of what the identity of the state is. It was born this way and will remain that way. The question is how to integrate Arab society into it. That's a very brave statement for an Arab politician to make. Some see him as like a, what's the word in America? It's like the good black, Uncle Tom, exactly. So some see him as like an Uncle Mansour Abbas, kind of like betraying his people. Other people say, no, he's doing the right thing because he gets stuff done by being like this guy. Yes.
What's the philosophy of like what's there?
So they really like Allah. They also really like the patriarchy. It's very like some of the people in this party have more than one wife. They do not like the gays at all. They are very socialist in their economics. Like they do want the government to dole out money. They want, their big issue at the moment is the Bedouin villages in the south. So there's about 100,000 Bedouins in unrecognized villages, meaning that sort of like, understand what's meant to be remote Aboriginal communities, WA, that are not connected to water, electricity, etc., but they live there. So there's about 100,000 Israelis, they're citizens of Israel that are not connected to the grid because they live illegally, and they want all those houses to be legalized. So they can get on the grid, they can get schools, they can get services, all of that sort of thing. Because when you're in an illegal community, a visitor or in these places, firstly, they look awful, houses are demolished, it's very unsafe, there's electricity wires running everywhere from generators, it's like, it's not a good situation. So they're trying to really fix the situation for the veterans, and they get like 90% of the vote you need.
100,000 votes get you a seat.
Yeah, well, you need to get 4 seats. You need, depending on how many people vote, about 150,000 votes or so. They got 4 seats. Okay, next party is Yisrael Beitenu, led by Victor Lieberman. They really want the Haredim to study the core curriculum. They represent mainly Jews from the former Soviet Union. They support having like buses on Shabbat, having non-kosher food widely available, and this guy hates Netanyahu. They've got a personal grudge, but it's also ideological, but it's mainly a personal grudge because of things. He used to work for Netanyahu, and no one can hate you more than someone that was your former boss. Do you know what I mean by that? I'm not saying anything about my former boss. I love her if I can, but there's some people have this thing with their former boss. So he makes really awful ads about Netanyahu. One of which I'm going to show you now. Firstly, in Hebrew, and then I'll translate it. You can get something from the imagery of Hebrew, but you'll see what I mean when I give you the English.
ביבי חושב שהוא המושך בחוטים, שימשיך לחשוב. ביבי? הצחקתם אותנו. תכירו את הרב טאו ודעותיו. הוא המושך האמיתי בחוטים. המדינה חייבת להתנהל על פי התורה. הקונסרבטיבים והרפורמים הם הנצרות החדשה. ההומואים סוטי ימין האלה אנשים אומללים. ככה אתם רוצים לחיות? ביבי יעשה הכל כדי להתחמק ממחדל מירון והמשפט, גם בתמורה להפיכת המדינה למדינת הלכה. יש ימין שטוב לביבי, ויש ימין שטוב לישראל. רק ליברמן שומר על המדינה מפני הביבי.
Okay, so for those that didn't catch the Hebrew, here is my translation. So it says, Bibi thinks he's pulling the strings of this country. Let him keep thinking. You make us laugh. Meet Rav Tao and his views, who really pulls the strings of this country. And then they quote this like homophobic rabbi that supports Netanyahu. And the first quote says, the country needs to run according to halakha. The reforming conservative Jews are the new Christianity. The gays who hate the right are a wretched people. Is this how you want to live? Bibi will do everything to escape his responsibility for the Meron disaster and his trial. If that means turning Israel into a halachic state, he will. There are right-wing parties who are good for Bibi, and happy music, there are right-wing parties that are good for Israel. Only Lieberman safeguards the country against the Bibi. Like this. You're convinced? You want to safeguard against the Bibi?
I don't know if like anti-Semitic conspiracy.
Yeah, but that's for you. So yeah, anyway, moving right along, let's do some work and get to labor. Labor is led by a woman, first woman, and Merav Michaeli speaks Hebrew unlike anyone else in the country. So if she was speaking to you, she would say, instead of Shalom Chaverim, she would say Shalom Chaverim v'chaverot. So everything would be in the masculine and the feminine. She's giving a speech about, Ethiopians and Druze. She'd say, "Anachnu hochem lazor ladruzim veladruziyot. Anachnu be'ad Ethiopian ve'Ethiopiot." It's like, so everything is in the masculine and feminine because she believes in gender inclusive Hebrew. Some other politicians have started doing, but it's like a thing that she's known for. Also, her party has by law the compulsory 50-50 split between men and women. So the first spot goes to a man, the second has to go to a woman, then has to go to man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, the whole way through. It's the only party that has a bylaw that ensures complete gender equality. Doesn't matter what the result of the primary is. So she's number one on the list, and then number two is Gilad Kariv, then it's like man, woman, the whole way through. What do they stand for? They are socially democratic. They're the party that founded the state, the legacy of Rabin and Golder and Ben-Gurion, etc. They very much support workers. They want to raise the minimum wage. They support refugees. They're very big on religious pluralism. And Merav Michaeli is currently the Minister for Transportation. So she's very much trying to get people out of cars and onto public transport through lots of sort of initiatives that promote public transport. Yeah.
What about public transport on Shabbos?
They have 4 public transport on Shabbos, which makes the Haredim not like her. But she says, look, the majority of Israelis need, especially for workers who only have 1 day off a week, if they want to visit their family or go to the beach or entertainment, they need this. Taxis are very expensive, and so public transport. But it is also a workers' rights issue as well. Yeah. They they used to have a lot of generals, and interestingly, their party, their new list has they had one general, but he's like number 9, so he's Omar Bar-Lev, so it's probably not going to get in. And it's a list that actually looks a lot like Meretz, I have to say. Like it's a more left-wing list than they've ever had before, and almost everyone on the list is they don't really talk about the occupation, they talk a lot about socialist economics. So it's a very economically left list, but they don't really speak about the Palestinians, which sort of differentiates them a little bit from Meretz. Yeah.
Recently gave an analysis about Labour, saying that in fact their central party, which has been dominated by other parties, was blaming the president to desert the works before.
Okay, that's fair enough, but I mean, a lot of former Labor voters have gone to Benny Gantz. Like Benny Gantz gets a lot of voters in the Peoples because they're more right-wing, doesn't speak to them for whatever reason. I think Labor does consistently vote for workers. I think it's unfair to say that there's left workers behind, but socialist economics in Israel is not as popular as maybe once used to be. So they want to raise the minimum wage, support unions, fight against privatization, the usual things. They're polling anywhere between 5 and 7, which is not great, but well, they once had 30 or 40, yes, but with Golden Meter, that was at 61. But now they're struggling. There was a big push to have them merge with Meretz. Meretz wanted to merge with Labor, and they didn't want to merge with Meretz. It was nasty, whatever. And so they're running on their own. It could be a big mistake. They might not pass the threshold, in which case it will be a lot of wasted votes. I think they will pass, but only just. If you want to be in Israel, you want to do a sympathy vote, like I reckon they'll make it.
Sorry, just explain the threshold.
So you need 3.25% of the votes, which is about 150,000 votes to get in. If you get 140,000 votes, there's no preferential system, so all your votes are wasted. So either you get in and you get 4 seats, or you've wasted 3.5 seats.
So no one gets in with 1 seat?
No, you have to have a minimum of 4. So what happened was, there was this guy called Meir Kahana, I'll get to him in a minute, he's a bit of a racist, and he got in with 1 seat in the 1980s, with like 60,000 votes or something like that. And then Israel wanted to make a law that would make sure that he would never get to the Knesset again. So they made a threshold that you need 2 seats to get into the Knesset. And then over the years it was raised to 3 and then eventually to 4. The thing is, if you have multiple parties with 1 or 2 seats, like it's already ungovernable as it is now, but if you had you've got 13 parties now. If you had like 17 or 18 parties, it would be more. So the idea of a minimum of 4 is to say you have to have some sort of constituency if you're going to be in the Knesset. Okay, this is Meirav's, not an ad, but it's actually, I think it's quite clever. So there was this incident in the Knesset where Itamar Ben-Gvir and Ahmed Tibi were yelling at each other, and then like all the men with small penises were like, whatever, and like she's like girl boss on the phone, I'm at work, and like that's her thing. Like when all the men are being, doing shtiga, like she also used to be a journalist, yes. If you want to see something really funny, she once starred in a romantic comedy. You get her lucky. Hilarious. It's on YouTube. Look at it. Yeah. And they're like flirting with each other. It's quite cute. Do we like Abuda? Yes. Okay, so next part is Meretz. Okay, they are protesters. They really don't like the occupation, but not as much as they don't like Bibi. They believe in a socialist economy. They're probably the only country that talks about climate change as the previous Minister of the Environment in Israel was Merav Michaeli. She promised to have for Israel to be net zero emissions by 2050. She introduced a tax on plastic plates. There's also a sugar tax introduced about, they like taxes, they're a left-wing party. Israelis don't like taxes, don't like parents. They are very pro-LGBT. Nissan Horowitz, who's pictured here, was the first gay minister first gay man to lead a party in Israel, who became minister for health in the last coalition. Nissan Horowitz did a reasonably good job, like most people would agree, in terms of managing corona, managing the hospitals. He prevented a lot of like doctor strikes by trying to sort of make accommodations to keep the doctors paid. And not that they're paid enough, but there was attempts that he was a reasonably good health minister, but sometimes people notice you more when you do your job badly than do your job well. But he got it through the pandemic. That's to his credit. Yes, he's expressed a lot of support for Ukraine. Yes, and he also built a field hospital in Ukraine as well, which was a very large field hospital in the second amount of months. Yeah.
So was Litzman health minister in COVID or Horowitz?
Litzman was for the first month, and then he was replaced by someone who I can't remember, and then after that it was Horowitz. COVID went for a while.
Yeah.
When it's finished now. Okay. Meretz gets a lot of voters from Arab towns, so you can see here Milia, Tira, Kufr Qasim, Fasuta, Furdis, Abu Ghosh, anywhere between 17 to 39%. Remember, nationally, Meretz only gets about 3 to 4% of the vote. So it usually does very well in these Arab communities, but that's not going to happen anymore because of what happened with Raida Zouabi. So Raida Zouabi was from an NGO that advanced women in Nazareth, and she was sort of handpicked to join the last coalition. And then there was a very crucial vote about whether West Bank settlers should have the same rights as Israelis, even though they don't live in Israel. She said, no, that's part of that. Like, why would I give them the same rights as Israelis? But her voting no, like she literally did thumbs down when she voted, that brought down the government. So Meretz basically kicked her out of the party for that. And so a lot of Arab voters who voted for Meretz will be angry at Meretz because of that. So I don't know if they'll get those Arab voters back and might go to another party. Meretz does have an Arabs on its list now, though. Alissa Nalka, who's a principal of a school in North, I think. There's one other. So they may, that may not. Will they pass 4 at best 5 if you really dive in hard to the God that doesn't exist? It's now led by Zehaba Galon, who's known for her excellent dancing skills. You know what I'm talking about? Yes, do you want to role play with that?
No, but it's bad.
It's like awkward mother dancing. Is anyone here getting married soon? You know how like some people at the wedding just don't get it? Yeah. So that's the Havagalam. Like, don't let her dominate the dance floor. Sorry. Advanced. Yeah. Let's just say 60 plus. Okay, I won't go beyond that.
Would you say that dancing skills are a heavier message in Israel than stand against the occupation?
I will say that I don't know if this story made it to the news in Australia. Do you remember how in Finland there's a female prime minister that went drinking?
Yeah.
So there's this video of her sort of just being like a young lady having fun with alcohol. And she was like, I'm allowed to do that. Like, that's my pride of life. And when I'm not prime minister, I'm allowed to do this stuff. But a lot of people all around the world had a go at her saying, you're about to join NATO and fight with Russia. You shouldn't be going out to parties and getting drunk and dancing. And she posted a very big pro, I can't remember her name, but pro the Prime Minister of Finland saying good on, so she's very much in favour of women in power. Yeah. She's got the dance for now, there's this app in Israel called Tinder. So the way it works is, if you see a picture of someone and you think, I'd like to make love to them, then you swipe right, and then if they also want to make love to you, they also swipe right, and then you can do that. potentially. If you don't like them, you swipe left, and then you have to have sex with someone else. Now, I've never used the app before, but I think that's how it works. Can anyone correct me? That's right? Yeah, but I didn't miss any details? No?
It's gross.
It's gross? If that's how it works. Okay. So, Merit is the only political party that advertises on Tinder. But when people go to Tinder, they're not looking for Merit. They're looking for, like, whatever. But Merit thinks our voters are mostly, cool people under 30. So these are not made up, real Merit ads on Tinder. You ready? Okay, first one. Remember when you swiped right and regretted it? Second Merit ad on Twitter. With us, it's not a one-night stand. And third Merit ad on Tinder. You can trust us that this is a serious relationship. Yeah. We're all swiping left? Yes. Swipe right, sorry. Swipe right.
And it is a cool way.
Yeah. It's cool. I don't get some 4 6, but like, the hookup market is very much in the Merit's hands. So that's good. So that's one demographic they're targeting. And then the other ad, they also have a merchandise store. And this is real. I'm not making this up. Real merchandise, you can actually pay money, and people will send you this merchandise. So the first thing you can buy of Merit, choose an item of clothing you think Merit would sell. So a hat, a t-shirt, undies, socks. Very good. You can buy Merit socks. One of the socks says center left, and the other says left. And the idea is that you should put your left foot before your center left foot. With merch? Merch? Yes, you're getting ideas. Okay. So that's literally on the Merit's website. You can buy that, and I don't know, get your merch as small.
Is it copyright?
Other merch, and I'm going to make a joke about sex in my merch. It's okay. So there's another item of merchandise that Merit has on their website is a condom. It says "Lehargish batuach Merit." If you want to feel safe, Merit. And you're meant to put that on your penis to feel safe. Okay? Yeah. Okay. So continuing on with the theme of ads. Last, not campus, senior campaign. Against ACYC policy. No, it was just a thing that okay, so in 2021, we had a lockdown in Israel, and so the whole campaign happened on Zoom. Did you have an election during lockdown? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So anyway, everyone campaigned through Zoom because you weren't. Merit actually followed.
Council election.
Yes. Okay. So if you wanted to go to a campaign rally, you had to go to a Zoom. So Merit made this ad to encourage their voters to join the Merit Zoom campaign rallies because that's how you had to campaign during the lockdown. Again, real ad. There's a joke about Bernie Sanders here as well. You all know who Bernie Sanders is? Okay, so enjoy.
שלום לכולם, אני מיצי פלדמן כהן, מספר 69 במרץ וראש מטה מרץ חתולים. אני מאוד שמח שאתם איתנו בחוג בית הזה. רציתי לספר לכם קצת על מה מרץ עושה בשביל הקהילה שלנו ולמה חשוב להצביע מרץ למען עתיד בעלינו.
אפשר שאלה? אני גיורא, אני מגדיר את עצמי חתול מתלבט. בפעם שעברה שמתי עבודה ונשר לי השפם. רציתי לשאול, למה להצביע מרץ?
שלום גיורא. קודם כל, יש לנו רשימה מאוד מגוונת, יהודית, ערבית, גברים, נשים, אנשים של כלבים.
למה אתם לא מציעים מקלדת ועכבר לכל חתול?
בואו נשאר בנושא של חוג הבית. מרץ היא השיאנית של החקיקה החברתית בכנסת, ואתם יודעים שהם דואגים לא רק למי שהם קורבים לצלוחית.
למה כשלוקחים אותנו לחיסון שמים אותנו בכלוב, וכשהם הולכים לחיסון לא? אני לא מצליחה להבין את זה.
אבל כשהם הולכים לחיסון לא, אני לא מבין את זה. חברים, אני יודע שנשבר לכולנו הזנב מהבחירות האלה. גם לי. אבל הפעם באמת אסור לנו לוותר. אני סומך עלינו, כי אני יודע שאתה כץ, אתה מביא את הגורים שלך לגשר כל שבוע, ואתה ירחמיהו, אתה כבר שכנעת את פרנקי וזוהי, שילקקו את הפצעים וילכו להצביע מרץ. וזה קורה, חברים, זה קורה. אתם איתי, אז קדימה, להפסיק לילל, לשלוף ציפורניים, זה בכפיים שלנו, אתם איתי, אתם איתי? היי?
שמין, רצית להגיד משהו? אתה על מיוט.
אמרתי מיהו.
ולכל אלה שנשארו, יש לנו הפתעה בשבילכם. הנה הג'ינגל שלנו בביצוע נוער מרץ.
שנייה. מרץ! זהו, עד כאן יש לנו.
This costume is for seats. I should have gone with a lucky ad. That was not successful. But so yes. What else? Any other thoughts on merits ads, paraphernalia, merchandise?
Very similar to the Greens strategy. I know that the Greens got one person in the last election who was looking at Brian.
Brian.
They were all very like suggestive and very funny. And
Yes.
definitely went for that same demographic.
Okay, next party
שלום
is called Religious Zionism. This party believes Jews are awesome. They love Jews. They love Jews so much that they won't sit with any other party that's not Jewish. That's how much they love Jews. Some would call them fascist or Jew supremacists. They do not like abortion. They do not like homosexuals. They really like settlements. And they are a combination of three parties, which is the National Union, led by Bezalel Smotrich, Noam, led by Avi Maoz, and Otzma Yehudit, led by Itamar Ben-Gvir. Of the many famous statements that Bezalel Smotrich has made, one is Muslims who don't agree that Israel belongs to Jews shouldn't remain here. So this is the kind of stuff they say in their speeches in the Knesset. There was a question.
Why would they anti-abortion if Judaism allows abortion?
Because Judaism allows abortion up to 40 days and only in very certain circumstances. And Israel allows abortion in a much more liberal way than Orthodox Judaism allows. So they want the narrow definition of abortion to apply and basically limit as much abortion as possible in Israel.
Also, like, they're definitely being influenced by, like, modern abortion discourse, right? They're like conservatives.
So something interesting. Sorry? Yes. So these are examples of halakhic laws that they won't be the state laws. Recently, Bezalel Smotrich went to the UK on a speaking tour, and the Board of Deputies, which is like the JCCB or ECAGE, tweeted this. This is a real tweet from the leadership of the Jewish community. The tweet says, got it in Hebrew at the bottom, "We reject the abominable views and the hate-provoking ideology of Bezalel Smotrich. Get back on the plane, Bezalel, and be remembered as a disgrace forever. You are not wanted here." Leadership of the Jewish community. Like that's like the Jeremy Lee one, okay? The community writing that, okay? And then Smotrich said back, "British Jews remind me of pre-Holocaust Germany because they're sucking out to the goy, thinking that they're like us. They need to have a spine and be proud to be Jews, stop making tweets like this." And then President Herzog also had a go at the Board of Deputies saying, "I believe in communication, but constant dialogue should come from respect. This is why I found the Board of Deputies' recent English and Hebrew tweets concerning MK Smotrich a few weeks ago deeply inappropriate, and the Hebrew version was downright insulting and elicited great discomfort. I believe in dialogue, and I urge my dear friends on the Board of Deputies to take a pause and invite Bezalel Smotrich to a conversation. Sound your pain, express your views and reservations, protest and debate, but do so as you sit down and talk." This is the President of Israel having a go at the diaspora community for saying this. But I think it's a really interesting issue because this party is going to do really well. They're going to get 12 or 13 seats. They're likely going to be ministers in the Netanyahu government, and they're going to be invited to speak all over the world and to represent Israel. And certain diaspora communities will say, "We don't like you, but your representative of the government, come and sit down and have some julep. And other people will say this. They'll say, go back to where you came from. And the question is, do you normalize this party or not? Because they've come to power through a democratic process. So some people say if you believe in democracy, you need to make a place for the elected democratic candidates. This guy could be a health minister, or minister for transportation, or God knows what. Other people would say, no, given their views are so extreme, we shouldn't normalize them in any way. We should leave the room when they speak. We shouldn't sort of shake hands with them. We shouldn't treat them. Just to give you a sense of what Bezalel Smotrich used to do before he was in politics, he organized the March of the Beasts. So he literally went to the Gay Pride March with farm animals that you can see here. And he said the people who are marching in the Pride March are like farm animals. Like, that's what he used to do. Last week, just to show you that he hasn't changed, there was an 8-year-old transgender student in a religious science school. The student came out and the school wanted the child to be expelled because they said that, it's making the other kids feel uncomfortable. There's a transgender student in the school. And Bezalel Smotrich, instead of defending this student as a person who represents religious Zionist Jews, he said, transgender child doesn't belong in a religious school, just like a non-kosher sandwich. Like, that's the level of discourse he's bringing into Israeli politics. He is running together with a guy called Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's from a list called Jewish Power. Jewish Power supports, I'm just quoting from their platform, they support waging a war of total elimination on Israel's enemies. They support Jewish sovereignty over the entire land of Israel from the river to the sea, including the Temple Mount. They want to transfer Arabs and left-wing Jews who are disloyal to Israel. They want to stop abortions and pride marches. They want to bring an electric chair for convicted terrorists, expel the families of terrorists. They want no prosecution of IDF soldiers who violate the code of conduct when this happens in self-defense. They want every rocket from Gaza to be retaliated with 50 rockets back on Gaza, and they want JNF to continue redemning Jewish land. That is literally quoted from their speeches and from their party platform. Yeah. I can't get stuff.
Very general. Serious misogynist.
So Ben-Gvir, interestingly, was not allowed to serve in the army because he had a conviction for terrorism. So Ben-Gvir himself didn't serve in the army. Other people in the list did. Number 9 on the list is the head of World B'nai Akiva. There's a lot of B'nai people in Israel who are supporting this party. And then the other people on the party mainly sort of leaders of yeshivot and sort of various activists for Judaism area. Yeah.
Like the campaigning together. So is this party and the religious Zionism party?
Yeah, so basically the way the list works is like 1 is from Smotrich's party, 2 is Ben-Gvir's party, 3 is Smotrich.
You said they're going to get like 13 seats.
Yes. So there'll be like 7 Ben-Gvir's, 7 Smotrich, and like 1 or 2 for Avi Maoz's party, which is the anti-gay party.
How have they done in the past? Have they had
so interestingly, Ben-Gvir has run on his own several times and not crossed the threshold. Now he's super popular. Okay, the question is, how did he go from 0 seats to potentially 13 seats on the 1st of November? And for that, I'm going to show you one of his, actually, no, I'll explain this. So in Israel recently, there was a number of terror attacks in Hadera, in Lod, in Beitar Illit, etc., where Palestinians came and killed Israelis who were not in any way involved in the fight. Now, what do most journalists do? What do most politicians do when they want to say something? They make a tweet or they make a Facebook post. And most journalists ignore politicians who just post things on their social media accounts because they say it's not news. What does Ben-Gvir do? He goes to where the journalists are. So in a way, he gets a lot more media attention because wherever there are cameras, he appears there rather than waiting for the journalists to come to him. So whenever there's a terror attack, there's always hundreds of video cameras there. I don't know how he does this, but within an hour of every terror attack, wherever it happens in the country, he's there. And then he gives a speech. So this is a speech he gave at one of the terror attacks. He said,
When the Israeli government bows down, does not govern and communicates weakness, the result on the ground is murderous terrorism. The people are demanding revenge now. So his thing is the reason that Palestinians attack Israelis because Israel is weak and it never used any force. And if only Israel actually used force against the Palestinians, there wouldn't be terror attacks anymore. A lot of Israelis believe that. A lot of Israelis believe that voting for him will make them safe and will stop Palestinian terror because they'll see that Jews are strong and proud, and then they won't mess with us anymore. That's the mentality, and that's why he's on this.
It's really interesting because I was like a while ago, I was speaking to someone who was saying that like the Jabotinsky war theory is this idea that like that if Israel is strong, then other nations will respect them, and that's kind of been proven correct through the Abraham Accords, right? In that Israel has remained strong in the by Likud standards, and suddenly there is normalization of relations with the United Arab Emirates and Morocco and Egypt, and I mean not Egypt, sorry, Qatar and Bahrain, and it's really interesting to see like somebody else who fully believes that, and it's like, is that actually what's happening? Is it just that Israel seems as strong and therefore suddenly like Arabs have to respect them, or is it?
I don't want him to be elected, but the best way to weaken this guy would be to make him Minister for Internal Security. Because, you know, when you're in opposition, like let's say Pauline Hanson, you know, when you're in opposition, you can say crazy whatever you want. And as long as you don't have to actually put your policies in place, it's very easy to be populist and say, we should do this, we should do that. Make him a minister. You watch within a month, the same thing will happen that happens now. He'll make all of these angry tweets and nothing will change. And then he won't be as popular anymore because he's going to be a terrible politician. He's an excellent opposition. And I think he's a very good campaigner. He's a very good communicator. He's very popular on TikTok, on Instagram, and on all the, most of his voters are young men under 25 who are religious or minority. He's done very well in that demographic. I'll show you one of his ads to give you a sense of that. So this is his ad on TikTok that was just posted a couple of days ago with him playing soccer.
מה אתה עושה? אני מתאמן בלהעיף את עודה וטיבי ועבאס לסוריה.
So the ad says, what are you doing? And he said, I'm trying to expel Ayman Odeh, Ahmed Tibi, and Mansour Abbas to Syria. These are three Arab politicians, and then he kicks the goal. That's the ad. Young boys like that. I don't know why. They do. That just plays well with a certain group of young men that like, he's funny, that was cool. Okay? That's a thing now that you have to deal with. Anyone sort of talking about Israel has to deal with, because this is a phenomenon that is going to be part of Israeli politics for the foreseeable future. Whether in opposition or in coalition, it's a thing and it's here to stay.
It is not really cool to have specialist in government.
I mean, that might. Yeah. I mean, like that's something that might happen unless you all make Kelly up.
Okay, so when the election happens on November 1st, I will be in Israel. I will not vote about it. But other people might. But the main issues that will decide Israel's next government are, one, people are going to vote on stability. So can the government last more than 3 months? That's going to be a factor. They're going to look for parties that can promise stability. Cost of living, like in Australia, but in Israel, it's particularly bad. Tel Aviv was recently voted the world's most expensive city in the world. So house prices, food prices, petrol prices, even milk prices are all election issues, and that is going to determine how people vote. Bibi's corruption trial is obviously still a factor in the Bibi no Bibi camp. And then the last question is, do you want a coalition that includes Arab parties or not? So most Israelis will ask themselves those 4 questions, and then based on how they answer that, that's how they will vote. Question number 3.
When you say most, how many are voting?
Usually 60 to 70% Israelis vote. So even though it's optional, it's quite a high turnout. Turnout is also big, like let's say all the Arabs stay home, which they're threatening to do at the moment, then that will help the right in a significant way. If the Haredim stay home, it will help the left. So it depends on who gets out,
what the weather is that day. There's a lot of other factors that determine how many people vote, but turnout is a significant factor. Yeah. 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 So you can, any Israeli citizen can vote, but you have to be in Israel. You can't, unless you work in an embassy, you can't vote outside of it. Yeah.
What is the stats of younger people voting in Israel?
So it really depends which younger, so young Haredians vote at a very high rate, young Arabs vote at a very low rate. So it's not sort of just youth, it's more demographics. Yeah. Okay. So I would add something else that, even though I just spent the last hour talking about policies, a lot of Israelis vote on the basis of their identity and actually ignore all of the policies, and they're just like, if I'm in Tel Aviv, I vote for Yesh Atid. If I'm in Jerusalem, I vote for Likud. If I'm Haredi, I vote for Degel or Shas. You know, like, so there's a lot of identity voting where people just always vote for the same party and never change because that's your identity. And that's like the vast majority of voting is identity voting. And all of these campaign ads don't mean anything because people just always vote for that party. So I want you to think of our community now, okay? And let's say the Knesset has all of these parties get elected, which is quite likely, they'll all get between 40 and 30 seats. Which views are acceptable in our community? Like from these views, who gets an invitation here, who does get an invitation? What do we do also for those of you that are Madrikim and Madrikot in Hashomer Tza'ir? How do we teach about this? What is this? And also for parents and friends as well. What's the kind of conversation you want to see happening around Israeli politics in your community?
I mean, I don't know if this is an answer more than just like react to things that you've said.
Yeah.
But I want people, especially like non-Israeli citizens, to care more.
Mm-hmm.
For like, I was shocked to find out that the leader of B'nai is number 9 in that party, and I'm gonna be even more like disheartened to find out that no one of B'nai cares.
Yeah.
Is my expectation.
Well, they probably won't know that. Yeah.
I can see the Jewish community here being is obviously much more conservative than what we saw in the UK. And I feel like any of those people, unfortunately, the ones that I would not be interested in, would be welcome. I think, I don't think like the JCCB would make a statement about them not being welcome. I think people on the left would.
In Gulf Australia. Not everywhere else. Yeah.
We talk a lot about being lefty Jews who don't feel welcome in larger Jewish spaces. We also aren't very welcome in left-wing spaces, non-Jewish left-wing spaces. So it's a really, really difficult position to be in, and we have these conversations quite a lot with our Chanechim about navigating that. But like we're struggling as much as we can, and there isn't a lot of healthy discourse. Like there just isn't. You try to have a conversation, and there's not a lot of places where there's where there's nuance, where there's a level playing. Like there's always going to be these power dynamics that are really messed up and uncomfortable. And I guess that's the role of pluralist spaces, but they don't really act in that way in reality.
Any other responses to this yet?
Well, I was just thinking about when that guy from BDS came. Not BDS, sorry. Breaking the Silence. Yeah.
BTS.
BTS.
Not to be confused with BTS.
Not to be confused with that K-pop sensation BTS.
Yes.
Yes. So breaking the silence when the guy from Israel came here and the ZFA was like, we won't be welcoming him.
Yeah.
And then when some smaller communities had a conversation with him, there was a silent protest outside, which ended up being not so silent because it was hijacked by some older members of the community. And they broke the silence, you're right.
When they got on the BTS train, did they do K-pop?
So it's just really I don't know, I know what I think the views that should be accepted in our Jewish community are, right? But yeah, it's interesting because I've recently sort of been part of a community of people from around the world talking about anti-occupation stuff, generally. And they have been speaking about how, like, when I first joined, they were like, oh, what's the policy in Australia? I was like, look, like Australia's very close with Israel politically, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, yeah, but it's still the official stance that the two-state solution is a possibility and like the goal. And I was like, is it? Like, it is, obviously. But the sense of disconnect between official policy and perspective on Israeli political issues feels very big to me, that sort of gap. And it's really, I'm just rambling a little bit now, but it feels like there's very few, like you said, very little amount of nuance in Israeli political conversations. And also that our Jewish community doesn't really, it kind of tolerates intolerance in a very large way.
Saying that, like, I think the reason there's no nuance in the Jewish community's conversations about Israel is because of like a sense of need for group protection. Like, if I talk to people about people sort of who agree with that stance, they'd say like, oh yeah, we can criticize Israel amongst ourselves, but anything that we say that's public facing has to be supported, which is why I think whatever the sort of the line is in Israel, the leadership of the Jewish community in Melbourne was supported publicly, and then everyone will like have their conversations around the Shabbat table. But yeah, I think that's kind of like, that's why, I mean, that quote from board deputies was surprising to me, because like, I just can't imagine the Jewish city saying anything so kind of controversial or so like bucking the trend from Israel, because and the trend in Israel is that breaking the silence is bad, so the basically whatever has to echo that stance. So they can't have nuance because they're so just worried about how people perceive it.
Yeah. I just want to share that, like, I face this dilemma as well, even in Jerusalem, because, you know, when I moved to Jerusalem, I immediately got all these privileges as a Jew, as a man, as someone that came from middle class, you know, family. I lived in a German colony, which is a very nice neighborhood in Jerusalem. And I know that my Palestinian friends who live in Melbourne and want to come to Jerusalem either can't get into the country, or if they do get into the country, won't have the same experience that I had. And for me, like, a lot of the way I sort of dealt with that discomfort is acknowledging the elephant in the room, like acknowledging that privilege, which I think a lot of Jews who make the don't do. And then for me personally, like, going to demonstrations, writing, tweeting, whatever it is, telling my story, and also working in a peace organization where I can sort of empower both Palestinian and Israeli children who want to live in peace to make them feel less alone. And something I would really encourage you to do is, you might feel maybe alienated from the Jewish community, but there are probably other minority communities in Australia that are victims of racism. You can also reach out to Muslim and Christian communities as well. And there's lots of dialogue groups, building bridges, you know, many others that you can be a part of. But don't sort of give up, like, find places where you can act in solidarity to forward your values.
It's interesting because I agree with you, and that nuance is like not there even in Israel. Like, you're right that like a lot of Jews don't accept their privilege or don't like acknowledge the tension, the elephant in the room, like you said. But then like over here, if you compare that to the US policy that passed, it's a really interesting thing, because in Israel it's like the political landscape is the whole problem, right? It's the whole legal landscape. Here it's like pro-Israel, anti-Israel. There's no nuance. And like if you look at the UMSU policy, I don't know if you've heard of it. The University of Melbourne Student Union passed a policy that was like, Israel is bad, BDS is good, with a bit more nuance.
The legitimization of the Israeli state is the legitimization of Palestinian nation.
Yeah, so it's like and so it was a very big deal in the young Jewish community recently, and also in the University of Melbourne Student Union, I think. And I think, having heard so much about it and reading it, it's really interesting to be like, oh yeah, I do support Palestinian like statehood, and I do support Palestinian like self-determination and all of that good stuff. Human rights of Palestinians, woohoo. And then like comparing, and like there's no place for that if you support any idea of the Jewish state in the area. And I think that it's a really yeah, like you said, like there's no nuance in Israel, but you can go and you can like participate in the things and go to protest. And here it's like there's no protest for you. You know what I mean? It's like they don't even accept that like this left-wing Zionist space could possibly be like productive in any way. And there's like no way of reconciling like, yes, I'm a socialist, yes, I believe in equality, yes, I believe that like theoretically that you know, if all states stopped existing, like we, you know, there might be a harmonious society. I don't know, like you don't know if I'm an anarchist, but like I have positions that I can align with you, actually all about fundamental positions. But the minute you say, like the minute I say anything about Israeli political landscape, it's like, oh, you support the Israeli political landscape? You know what I mean? So that's what I was saying.
And that's even that thing of like not necessarily having a protest to go to when it comes to left-wing Zionist issues. Like even there's Jews Against Fascism, who we've been affiliated with in the past, put out a thing saying leave your Zionist youth movements. Yeah. And we're like, no, but we want to have this, like we want to have this precious, healthy discourse, and you're saying no, that's not the space for you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard, and I feel like I want to come back in there so we can have a circle called Zionist Anonymous where you share your speech. 3 months, it's my last philosopher.
I had to have a conversation where I explained what Zionism is to my Gaussian friend.
Yeah.
And it was I told Donna about substance. I was like, I was so stressed. I was fiddling with a pillow the entire time. I was like, yes, actually what I mean by this, and I was like putting so many layers of like qualifications.
Yeah, and what you should have done is just come with the merits, come down. Then you would just like, so I want to share this quote as a journalist from another journalist in Israel named Ittay when he was asked, what's it like being a journalist when you have so many elections? And he said, it's like being an undertaker in the middle of a plague. Meaning that journalists, we have a lot of work this time of year, but it's not the kind of work that we want. Speaking of journalism, I really encourage you that when you do read news from Israel and Palestine, to read widely. A lot of the reason why I know what I know is because I read all of these websites almost every day to get a sense of what is being said on the far right, what is being said on the far left, why do people support Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir, why do people not like Zahava Galon or in Haaretz, why do people like Merav Michaeli, etc. It's hard to be educated without reading widely, so this is, for me, the beginning of changing the conversation, is not getting your news from one source. And now, if you do have to get your news from one source, obviously the source you should choose is Classic Sunday, arguably the best site in Australia. So if you haven't already subscribed, go to classicsunday.net.au, click on the subscribe button, subscribe to my column, subscribe to the columns of Deborah Stone and Michael Desante and all of our wonderful journalists and even some Hashy Bogrim that have written for us in the past, and you will get a view with your lens. But then don't only read us, make sure you read all of these guys as well. If you want to copy this presentation, shoot me an email, and otherwise, shoot nothing to you, and